According to legend, a fortune in gold lies buried somewhere in America's Rocky Mountains.
Imagine $33 million of gold bullion just waiting to be found.
The only clue to the treasure's location is a cryptic map drawn by the sole survivor of a doomed expedition. His descendants seek the gold for almost 200 years. But just when it appears to be within their grasp, terrible events unfold.
Rumor has it the treasure is actually cursed, and many people have died trying to find it.
Disease, violence, alleged supernatural forces, all have thwarted treasure-hungry adventurers seeking the hidden bullion.
There are those who believe that this treasure is guarded by some otherworldly force. Something may be trying to keep us from finding that treasure.
This is the story of a glittering fortune, found and then lost in the Rocky Mountains. The story begins in 1993 in Colorado. At that time, Christopher O'Brien was an investigator specializing in unexplained phenomena.
I've been interested in the paranormal and the metaphysical subjects and UFOs. Anything that has an air of mystery about it, I've always been interested in these things. But along the way, I also wanted to uncover some treasure legends and maybe do some follow-up and maybe do some treasure hunting myself.
During the course of his research, O'Brien was contacted by a mysterious man.
This guy approaches me and he kind of hinted around that he had some evidence that involved a fabulous treasure. And he hinted around that he was involved in looking for this treasure, and I was very intrigued by this. And I kept in touch with him and set up a meeting so that we could talk about it more.
O'Brien arranged to meet the man at a local cafe.
I walk into this cafe, and I look around and I see him, and he motions me to the back. He wanted to sit in the corner away from prying eyes, and he sits down and he begins to tell me this story. And he really blew my mind with what he told me.
The mysterious man claimed he'd married into a treasure-hunting family. For generations, they'd searched for caches of gold bullion buried 200 years earlier by a doomed expedition led by one of their ancestors. The man said his family was convinced they were close to uncovering the legendary cursed gold of Treasure Mountain. A mystery that began in the 18th century with an adventure into the untamed Colorado wilderness. (1790), Louisiana. At that time, a vast Spanish-ruled area that stretched from the Gulf of Mexico to the border of present-day Canada. At a small outpost on the Missouri River, a group of Frenchmen prepared for an expedition. Their official mission was to survey the territory's mineral wealth. Unofficially, their plan was to journey to the Rocky Mountains and find fabulous new sources of gold.
Ever since the conquistadors arrived in the New World, there have been stories headed back east of raided Incan temples and looted Mayan cities, and gold dripping out of mountains, and golden masks. And so these tales have been coming back to the East and back to Europe for quite some time at this point.
Among the expedition's number was a journalist. Most versions of the legend give his name as simply LeBlanc.
There's not a lot known about him, but we can speculate. He was the chronicler, he was a historian of some kind, so he was literate, he was educated. And we can also guess that if he came out west looking for gold with a need to increase his fortune, that he would do anything he could and take any risks to find that fortune.
LeBlanc didn't know it, but his lust for gold was about to trigger a chain of events that would secure his place in Colorado folklore forever. The expedition began its long journey westwards. LeBlanc and his men crossed the Great Plains, likely followed the course of the Platte River, and entered the Rocky Mountains. The Frenchmen found themselves alone in a vast, untamed land.
The west of the 1790s it's the frontier to the people who live in the east. They can't even wrap their minds around the enormity of it. They think they know how big it is, but they're not quite sure.
In the 1790s out west, there are no roads. The mountains are huge. There's no stores out here to buy anything. So you're on your own, and there's no support. There's no police force, there's no cavalry at that time. You're totally alone in the wilderness. And they don't even know how big the wilderness is, and it's huge.
LeBlanc and his companions followed local waterways through Wolf Creek Pass and made camp in the shadow of a mighty mountain. The men immediately began prospecting. It's likely they panned in the local streams and found tiny gold flakes. They follow the trail ever higher into the mountains, eager to find the gold source. After weeks of searching, one of LeBlanc's party made a discovery. It was the unmistakable glow of gold ore.
LeBlanc and his cohorts hit the mother lode, and it's beyond their wildest dreams. I can only imagine how they felt. Suddenly, the real prospect of becoming some of the wealthiest people they've ever met or ever heard of is right there in their hands, right before them.
The Frenchman's next challenge was mining the precious metal out of the tough Colorado granite.
In the 18th century, to get gold out of the ground is much more difficult than prospecting for gold. You're gonna have to dig into that rock with a pick until your hands are blistered and you're bleeding and sweating.
The Frenchmen smelted the gold trapped in the ore. Before long, they had a stack of 18-inch ingots. The legends state they produced between $5 and $33 million worth of bullion in today's money.
So in just a few months, this intrepid band of Frenchmen has left civilization, traveled across the wide expanse of the West, struck gold, and is now sitting on a king's ransom.
Because of the Frenchmen's discovery, the peak they mined would forever be known as Treasure Mountain. The Frenchmen mined for months. Then a balmy Colorado summer made way for autumn's bitter chill. It was clear to LeBlanc and his companions that they must find shelter before winter set in.
So these 300 Frenchmen have been going all summer long mining. The weather's been nice, sunny, kind of cool at 11,500 feet. But come fall, things get kind of serious in Colorado. They probably realize that the snow could be 12 feet deep come winter and that they really can't stay there.
LeBlanc and his colleagues planned to spend the winter in the Spanish settlement of Taos, 120 miles away. The question was, what to do with their stash of precious bullion?
They didn't really want to bring their gold with them because it's too dangerous. You know, if you walk into town with millions of dollars in gold, someone's either going to kill you and take it, or you're going to raise suspicion. So they decide really that it's probably best to bury the gold. Only they will know where it is.
The story goes, the Frenchmen decided to hide the gold in 3 separate caches. Concealed in secret locations, their fortune would be secure until they returned to claim it. Some legends state they left 8 clues to help them relocate the gold.
They then make markings in the area to remember where they've put it, with supposedly putting fleur-de-lis carvings on piles of rocks so they'll remember where their fabulous treasure is hidden when they come back in the spring.
LeBlanc recorded the cache's locations and the positions of the markers on a secret treasure map. As planned, the Frenchmen saw out the harsh winter in the comfort of Taos. When spring arrived, they were eager to add to their already considerable wealth. The expedition headed north to resume excavating their gold mine. But it wouldn't be long before the curse of Treasure Mountain claimed its first victims. Legend states the Frenchmen were soon struck down with sickness.
These men could be ravaged by scurvy, which at that time, the French understood they could eat citrus fruit and not get it, but there's no citrus fruit there. With scurvy, you would have seen the men fatigued, you would have seen swollen joints, painful limbs. They just would not have felt well at all.
The pace of work slowed. Men collapsed through fatigue. One retelling of the story states LeBlanc fed his sick companions a vitamin-rich infusion made from local nettles to ward off the sickness. But his efforts were too little, too late. His companions were riddled with disease. And now, the weakened expedition was threatened by a new danger. The local Native American Ute tribe was observing the Frenchmen.
The Utes probably don't like watching these Frenchmen run all over the mountain, chipping holes in it, and possibly taking gold that they really thought was theirs. In fact, they are the landowners in their eyes. The Utes really don't like having somebody else stealing their stuff.
It would be akin to having a stranger walk into your house and pop open your refrigerator and say, "Oh, this looks tasty and this looks tasty," and you'd stand there and put up with it. I don't think so. And neither did the Utes. And after a while, they became suitably incensed.
The Ute warriors attacked LeBlanc and his companions.
They really had no idea the level of savage intensity, arrows whizzing through the air everywhere, tomahawks, lances. You can imagine being one of these men, already fatigued, wondering what is going on. This came out of nowhere. It's an absolutely terrifying experience.
These diseased miners that were all lethargic and really not up to par, they just can't hold their own. They're setting ducks for the Native Americans that are attacking them. And so most are killed right away.
The survivors knew their time at Treasure Mountain was up.
They can see a pretty obvious decision that needs to be made. Their numbers are down, their position is compromised, they're being attacked. They have to save their skins and possibly save their gold.
It seems the men were too few in number to transport the gold bullion back to the Missouri River. There appeared to be only one course of action.
They choose to take whatever gold they might have mined in that spring, bury it along with their other caches, note that on their treasure map, and try to get out of the area with their lives.
The men broke camp, striking east on the 700-mile journey back to the Missouri River. But they weren't safe.
Well, according to some versions of the legend, the French expedition is able to get off the mountain and apparently out of the mountains, out of the Front Range, onto the plains before they're attacked by the Kiowa tribe. This has a completely devastating effect on the party, taking them down to only perhaps even 5 men out of the hundreds who left originally.
LeBlanc was one of the survivors. He and 4 others continued their journey east towards the Missouri River. But without horses and short of food, their situation was desperate.
These 5 guys are in a survival situation. They really don't have much equipment. They're lucky to escape with the shirt on their back.
Many versions of the legend state the men ran out of food. Still hundreds of miles from safety, their only chance of survival appeared to be cannibalism.
The fact that they may have eaten their partners is probably true. You know, back then, if you didn't have any food and you were desperate, cannibalism, unfortunately, is a reality, especially back in those days when they didn't have much choice.
Whatever happened, the legends state only LeBlanc and one other made it back to the outpost on the Missouri River. LeBlanc's companion died within days of making it to safety. The young French journalist was the expedition's sole survivor. What he did next is uncertain. But all versions of the story seem to agree on one thing.
And that's that LeBlanc makes a map. He makes copies of this map. He gives one to the French government, gives one to his family, and then disappears from history.
But as investigator Christopher O'Brien listened to the mysterious man, he would learn this wasn't the end of the quest to retrieve the French gold, nor the last time the curse of Treasure Mountain would strike.
Obviously, you have a 300-man expedition discovers a lot of gold, and you have maps that indicate where this gold is kept, because they couldn't escape with it. So obviously you're going to have somebody that wants to go back and get it.
O'Brien learned the quest now moved forward 50 years. In 1840, a Frenchman arrived in a small town in present-day New Mexico.
According to the legend, a young man arrives in Taos who knows the story of Treasure Mountain. In fact, he even claims to be the grandson of LeBlanc and is interested in finding the treasure again.
It's likely the townsfolk would have dismissed LeBlanc's grandson as just another eccentric prospector driven crazy by gold fever. If it wasn't for the fact he had a map.
Unbelievably, this young Frenchman claims to have his grandfather's map that actually has the 8 clues that will lead him to rediscovering where the gold bullion treasure is buried on Treasure Mountain.
LeBlanc's grandson was a foreigner in a strange land. Although he had the map, he needed help finding the gold's likely location. One interpretation of the story is that he hired a local Mexican guide named Bernardo Sanchez to take him to Treasure Mountain. The two men joined forces to retrieve the gold buried half a century before by LeBlanc's grandfather. Sanchez led LeBlanc and his party of French miners into the mountains. One retelling of the legend claims the men discovered strange markers, fleur-de-lis symbols carved into rocks, and piles of stones, signs matching those on the map drawn by LeBlanc's grandfather.
They get very excited, because now the map is matching what they're finding, the fleur-de-lis on the rocks, so they know they're close to a gigantic fortune in gold bullion buried right at their feet somewhere, so they're very excited.
The men searched the area for months. but they found nothing. Then, the curse of Treasure Mountain struck again. Just like his grandfather before him, LeBlanc was being closely monitored by the local Native American tribe. According to legend, warriors attacked the mining party. LeBlanc's grandson was killed. Inside his jacket pocket was his grandfather's secret treasure map. Only the guide, Bernardo Sanchez, made it out alive. For the second time in 50 years, the curse of Treasure Mountain had thwarted the LeBlanc family. But the quest for the buried gold was far from over, because Sanchez had a secret. He claimed that during the battle with the Native Americans, one of the dying French miners revealed a clue to finding the treasure.
According to this man, Bernardo just needs to find a fake Native American burial mound, stand on it at 6 a.m. some September morning, and watch where his shadow falls. Where his head is, that's where the treasure lies.
Armed with this knowledge, Sanchez spent years scouring Treasure Mountain, looking for the mound. But he never found it. In time, the dying Frenchman's clue became just another part of the now famous Treasure Mountain story. As investigator Christopher O'Brien would learn, this strange clue would play a critical part in the next stage of the quest to find the lost French gold. He discovered that 30 years after LeBlanc's grandson's death, a new set of adventurers would take up the challenge.
It was during the 1870s that some colorful characters emerged in the West, treasure hunters. Gentlemen extremely motivated, good researchers, very good at not only digging in the earth, but also digging into historical records.
And it would be in the hands of one such treasure hunter that the LeBlanc map would reappear. Legend gives his name as William Ewell.
Characters like William Ewell are a classic in the American West stories. They hear all these tales that have been coming for quite a while now from the West about gold in the hills and mines to be explored, and you just have to pick up a nugget and bring it home and you're rich.
Ewell spent his days scouring the nearby valleys and mountains. His aim was to find the 8 clues marked on his tattered old map and the location of the mysterious mock burial mound. His quest reached the ears of Asa Poor, a man with an eye for an opportunity.
A successful prospector like Asa Poor actually goes out in the wilderness, looks at those different colored rocks, and finds the gold. He's successful. Asa Poor knows what he's doing, and he's shrewd, intelligent, and when he sees an opportunity, he goes after it.
Yule's quest for a mock burial mound linked to a fabulous lost treasure piqued Poor's interest. Because incredibly, Poor had found a mound that exactly fitted Yule's description.
Each has something the other wants. William Yule has the map to the treasure of Treasure Mountain, and Asa Poor has the knowledge of this burial mound. So he knows this could well be the key to finding the treasure.
The two prospectors entered into a partnership and headed off to find the lost French gold.
After Asa Poor and William Yule head out into the mountains, they actually start finding some of the clues. They find the fleur-de-lis carved on the trees and the rocks, and just like the map shows, they're actually hot on the trail of this treasure.
Following Poor's directions, they arrived at the false grave. Just as the legend instructed, one of the men stood atop the mound at 6 a.m. and cast a shadow across the ground. They dug the spot where his head's shadow fell.
They begin digging, and they dig, and they dig, and they're so excited. They're rubbing their hands together, probably spelling each other because it's a lot of hard work. It's bony soil, and they dig, 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 and they get down so many feet, and they find absolutely nothing.
Could it be that this was the wrong mound, or that Yule's map was a fake? Neither man thought so. Asa Poor knew he and Yule must take a new approach.
So at this point, Poor still doesn't give up. He now says that they will try something called mineral rods, equipment that's being sold at this time that at least claims to be accurate and be able to find the gold you're searching for, the ore, whatever you need. These machines that you can hold will find it for you.
The mineral rod led Yule and Poor to a spot 2 miles from the mock burial mound. The men immediately started digging. The legends state they excavated about 4 feet down when suddenly the ground gave way. Had Yule and Poor found the entrance to a secret cache containing millions of dollars of French bullion?
Of course, they think they're onto the treasure. Their heart's pounding, they're excited, they're gonna find this gold.
Poor lowered himself into the opening. Incredibly, he found himself in a clearly man-made tunnel. He crawled down the shaft, keeping his eyes peeled for the distinctive glint of gold.
He gets very excited at this point. I imagine his heart is just pounding a mile a minute. He's looking all over, he's looking for gold, he's trying to squint into the darkness, he works his way all the way to the end.
But Poor discovered the chamber was empty. With no new leads, the men abandoned their search.
They have spent pretty much their life's fortune. They're broke, they're tired, they're exhausted, they're frustrated. They finally just give up the search. Apparently, it was the curse of Treasure Mountain that got these guys again.
But this treasure legend refused to die. A 120 years after Yule and Poor's failed quest, investigator Christopher O'Brien sat talking to a mysterious man who'd been involved in the Treasure Mountain legend's final chapter. The man stated his in-laws were descendants of the first LeBlanc, who survived the doomed expedition of the 1790s. Then he produced something to back up his extraordinary claim.
Takes out his wallet and he carefully unfolds. It looked like silk. It was some sort of cloth material that obviously was very old. It was stained, it was kind of tattered. And he shows it to me and he says, "This is a map to the treasure."
To O'Brien, it was clearly the same map drawn in the 1790s by the first LeBlanc.
I'm sitting there flabbergasted looking at this thing, and it looks real to me. There seemed to be mountains indicated, river systems. There was some rough kind of writing on it. I didn't get a very long look at it, but it obviously was compelling because it looked very old.
Along with the topographical information were 8 strange markings, clues the man claimed to finding the lost treasure.
What was very impressive about it were these 8 sigils. There was a pair of boots, there was a chalice, there was mountains, there was like a cross. There was different types of symbols on it.
The mysterious man told O'Brien his in-laws had found 7 of the 8 clues, and that he believed he'd recently found the 8th.
So, of course, the first thing I do is I ask him, I say, how did you find this 8th clue after the family's been looking at it, looking for it for generations? How did you find it?
It's now the man told O'Brien an incredible story about the discovery of the final clue. And what happened next? (1993), Del Norte, Colorado, 40 miles northeast of Treasure Mountain. The mysterious man was hunting elk in the woods. It began to rain. He sought shelter beneath the overhang of a nearby cliff.
Obviously, he doesn't want to get caught out in this type of weather, so he quickly looks around for a place to, hide and maybe hole up for a little bit and let the storm pass over. So he spies this about 3-foot opening behind some underbrush, and he thinks, well, maybe it'll open up.
The man squeezed through the gap and found himself in a passageway.
His first thought was, great, I'm out of the weather. But then as he's sitting there, of course, like anyone, he got curious. And so he started to work his way back, and it goes into the mountainside about 20 feet.
The man discovered the passageway was blocked by a cave-in. He shone his torch across the damp walls. It's then he spotted something.
As he's looking on the wall next to the cave-in, what does he see? He sees a chalice which he knows from the treasure map is the missing symbol of the 8 symbols that have been searched for by this family, his in-laws, for many, many generations.
All thoughts of hunting elk were overtaken by the possibility of finding millions of dollars of lost French gold. But there was a problem with the man's story. The mountains near Del Norte, where he claimed to have found the 8th clue, are 40 miles from Treasure Mountain. How could he have found a clue to the gold here? Had everyone who'd sought the treasure been looking in the wrong place? Or was the man mistaken? There is one possible explanation how the two stories come together.
Since the Del Norte area is on a direct path from where the LeBlanc party would have been running away from the Native American attack, the first one, they could have very well taken either all of the bullion or probably just some of it with them, and that gold was slowing them down. They could have very well buried it in this area that this mystery man is claiming he has found the 8th clue.
So it was possible the French expedition buried a portion, if not all, their bullion at the site in Del Norte. And that LeBlanc crafted new clues to its location both on the ground and on his map. Soon after his discovery, the mysterious man returned to the passage with his treasure-hunting in-laws.
The first thing they want to do, of course, is go in and see the sigil to make sure that his claim is accurate. And the expert of I think it was the grandfather, goes in there, and the patriarch is looking at this symbol, and he looks at his grandson-in-law and agrees that you have found the lost symbol.
The family began excavating the cave-in. Their hours of effort revealed a further 12 feet of passageway.
Well, imagine their excitement as they're digging and they finally get this obstruction cleared away, and it was quite sizable. It went for quite a number of feet. And they finally get it away, and one of them squeezes over to look inside, and he finds that the tunnel continues into the hillside, but not for very far, because he yells back out to them that there's a big boulder that appears to have been purposefully put in the way to further obstruct the tunnel.
Why would someone deliberately block the passage? Had it been to hide the gold? The family was discussing how to remove the obstacle when night began to fall.
But they want to give it one more shot before it gets too dark to continue working. And they had brought some candles and they had flashlights, so they're going to give it one last shot.
But the next 3 minutes would turn out to be the most terrifying of their lives.
So he has this bundle of candles and he starts to place them going down the tunnel towards the end where the obstruction is. As he's putting the last candle down on the ground, a snake comes out of nowhere and fires at him and narrowly misses him. I've had this happen myself, and I know how terrifying it is, and he backpedals out of there breathlessly.
But he and his family were soon threatened by another malicious force.
As he's coming out from out of nowhere, he's followed by a swarm of bats that are squeaking and acting very aggressively. instead of just flying out of the entrance of the cave and taking off, they start dive bombing and attacking people, which is very uncharacteristic behavior for bats. And this is pretty freaky to everybody. The bats finally start to fly away, and everything calms down. So he starts to light the candle, the first candle at the entrance to the tunnel, and much to everybody's horror, the candle at the other end by the boulder, the last candle he had just placed before the snake came at him, that comes on. Now, I know this sounds incredible, but this is what he told me.
The man and his family were transfixed with fear. How could a candle light by itself? But their ordeal wasn't over.
So as that candle comes on, then out of nowhere, out of the gloom of the tunnel, comes this big white-colored owl.
The huge bird swooped just inches above the treasure hunters' heads. It was one close encounter too far.
This is a series of events that I think would scare anybody, but for people that are in this position, knowing that there's curses on gold and knowing some of the folklore around the area, several of them have said they will never, ever go back. They don't care how much gold is there, they will never go back to that particular location again.
The mysterious man told O'Brien no one had since returned to the cave to try and recover the lost French gold. But after hearing this extraordinary tale, the investigator was left in no doubt. The treasure is real.
Personally, after all the research that I've done and being involved with this treasure hunting family and hearing their story, I am absolutely convinced that not only does the French treasure exist, but there's probably several of them. It's probably been broken into pieces. And it's just waiting for somebody with a lot of luck and some skill and some perseverance to find it.
To date, no one has reported finding a fabulous cache of gold bullion, fitting the description of that in the Treasure Mountain legend. Is it possible the story is nothing more than a myth? Is there any reason to believe the treasure is out there?
Some of the treasure legends in Colorado, since they do have some historical basis, have actually been found. And if those treasures could be found, then there is a possibility that this $33 million, one of the biggest treasures ever buried in Colorado, is out there and will be found someday.
But if the treasure could be real, then so too could the curse.
Well, for all you aspiring treasure hunters out there that want to start poking your nose into the Treasure Mountain legends, be careful what you wish for, because that curse may still be intact.